Of course, I knew I liked men, but I really didn't have any experiences at all along those lines.
It made me so proud to show that we're veterans, we serve this country, and we need to be recognized.
Had 12 people die in my arms, which had a profound effect on the rest of my life.
The German soldier with that grenade stood up just a few feet away.
We're not of one race or gender or sexual orientation or religion.
On the one floor of my barracks, there was 4 gay guys. Everyone was a damn good soldier.
Sophomore year, I saw the recruiting officers were at our school, my high school, Brandon High School, and my brother had just enlisted and gone off, and I knew a lot of my family was in the military too, so I figured, why don't I go see what it's about? But then somebody else told me, oh, you can't do that, you're gay, they don't accept gay people. I didn't believe him at first, so I was like, oh, what's this about? And told me about don't ask, don't tell, and if I went into the military, I would have to be closeted. And I mean, I'm a sophomore, so I didn't think too much about it. But I had just started my school's GSA, and I figured, oh well, I just started a gay club. There's not a chance. They know I'm gonna be gay. I mean, there's no way I can get in there. So I just kind of, it's not meant for me.
I was sort of a nerdy kid in school. Preferred in the neighborhood playing with the girls more than I did with the boys. Went to Ohio State, blossomed. I really came out of myself. I was in a fraternity, I was a homecoming king court, did all of these sort of typical things, and the summer of my sophomore year was drafted.
The Army was running short in Second World War of candidates and wanted to lower the age limit to 17, but the voters wouldn't let them. So they put in a program called the Army Specialized Training Program and had anyone who was 17 years old take a test. And the idea was if you qualified, you would be trained as an engineer. So thousands of us 17-year-olds took the test. We should have been suspicious when we all passed. I got in trouble right away in training because they showed a film about hating the enemy, and I protested. I said, as a good Catholic, I couldn't hate the enemy, so they called me in and interrogated me and gave me a danger mark on my records, and as a result, I went overseas. When you finished training, you became a PFC, but I didn't. They refused me that raise in rank and sent me overseas as a private.
Which is entry level or?
Entry level, and furthermore was not protected by the Geneva Convention. We were beyond VJ Day, not VJ Day, but beyond the invasion of Normandy.
That had already passed.
That had already passed. So I went over with the 82nd Division. We went right up to the border of Germany and went into combat immediately.
I was a sophomore at college, and I had my grades had fell below the average, so I decided I wanted to join the military because I was very confused at that period of time. Also, I did a lot of reading and studying, but I couldn't find the answers that I wanted to. And for our old wives' tale said, if you're not a man, the military service will make you a man. You'll make a man if you join the Army or the Air Force. So I didn't want to go in the Army, so I decided on the Air Force. And I joined with that in the back of my mind, which I can now say is still just a wives' tale, because whoever or whatever you are when you join the military service, that's what you are, period. So I joined it, and on the question that asked about the homosexual experiences, I answered no, of course, because I wanted to go in. I was volunteering, and nothing else really was said about it. My gripe with the military is I served in the Air Force. I had no problems. I was just discharged honorably. I joined the Army Reserve, and I enjoyed my enlistment in the Army Reserve, and I was planning to re-enlist. But through some method, they discovered that I was living with my uncle and another male, and they started to investigate me, and because of this, they said this was unsuitable living conditions, that two people, they made it a sexual thing, and for that I was given a less than honorable discharge from the Army Reserve. And I resent that to this day. I feel that I should have gotten an honorable discharge because I wasn't caught in any kind of act. I had honorably served in the Air Force, and I didn't have any incidents showing anything about gayness or homosexuality. When I did it on my own time and places that were off base and with no complications whatsoever. There was a time when people of darker complexion were not thought of as human beings up to the extent that they weren't given certain jobs, and to an extent it's still true today. In certain areas, a lot of people think that well, we have integration now and everybody is just, everything is hunky-dory, and that's not true. And so for people who haven't traveled much or haven't been to certain areas, there are people that still hate people because of their color, skin color, and there are certain areas where people live where people of certain skin color can't live. And the same thing is true of sexual orientation. There are some places based on this. But I feel eventually the world is gradually in a stage of coming together. As they say, we are all going to get together before Christ comes. And if this is the case, we have a long duration to wait before he actually will be able to come.
Amen.
The nuns taught me for the first 9 years. Then I had to go on to high school. I went through college. Of course, I knew I liked men, but I really didn't have any experiences at all along those lines. And I was rather naive, I would say, coming from a small town, probably. Shortly after Pearl Harbor, I knew I'd probably be drafted anyway, so I thought I would just make my own choice as to what I wanted to do. And I proceeded from apprentice seaman through first class, and by that time my advisor said, well, you're going about as far as you can go, and you've got a good education. We want to put you into a college, and they put me in MIT, where I was trained as a meteorologist. When I was assigned at an air base in Shanghai, where Chiang Kai-shek had his officers, my job was mainly, since I was a meteorologist, to help to train his officers, because they apparently had not much training in meteorology. At that time, Chairman Mao was coming in. He was invading China. In fact, he was at the borders, because the borders are still quite a ways away from Shanghai. And he was able to live off of the villagers and people as he went through in order to sustain himself. He could get his supplies easily that way. Where Chiang Kai-shek was segregated, penned into Shanghai, and the only way he could get his supplies was have them flown in from Burma or across the hump, or areas that were rather remote, and very mountainous regions where the weather was extremely bad a great deal of the time. So he kept losing a lot of his supplies, and so that's why he needed someone, his officers, who would be more familiar with weather conditions, being able to brief the pilots at least. I remember a couple of people that were forced out, yes. And that was mostly when I was in the Seabees. And I had quite a few circle of gay friends there. And we went to clubs and drank and do things together, but nothing really that would be disrespectful to the Navy in any way. We just had a good time when we went out, that's all. And we could, within our own circle, we could do what we liked to do.
After, I just kind of started playing my life around, doing other things, going to college, just like everybody else does who doesn't join the military, I found out about a group called Soul Force and their new campaign this year, which is Don't Ask, or Right to Serve campaign. And they're going to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I mean, it's not a question of whether or not this policy is going to stand up to us. It's just a question of when it will fall. It's government-based discrimination, government-sanctioned discrimination.
I'm standing in a room of naked men all my age and going through the physical exam. We sit down and there was a questionnaire, and one of the questions was, "Are you a homosexual?" And I checked no. And I checked no, not because I was afraid that something would happen if I checked yes, but the truth of the matter was that wasn't who I identified myself as being at that time. I looked down the list and I saw operating room technician. So I said, what's an operating room technician do? And the man said, do you ever watch Ben Casey? And I said, yes. And he said, well, when Ben Casey's operating on somebody, that's the person that stands next to him and hands him instruments. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And I said, do you think I would have to go to Vietnam? Oh, no, not a chance. You'll either go to Hawaii or Germany.
I went into combat in the Saar Basin, actually, right on the border of Germany, as the fourth member of a mortar squad. I carried bandoliers of ammunition on my back, and we attacked a German machine gun nest and won it, but by the time we reached it, German tanks had surrounded us and they were spraying machine gun fire. And knowing my infantry tactics, I knew they were sending someone, while they pinned us down, to crawl up with a grenade, throw it into the machine gun nest where we were. So we talked about it, 3 or 4 soldiers together, and we finally decided to surrender. So I stood up with my white t-shirt, I remember, and sure enough, that was the German soldier with that grenade stood up just a few feet away and brought us down the side of the mountain and turned us over to the German army.
Well, I co-founded Service Members Legal Defense Network 13 years ago with Michelle Beneke. We were a successor group to a group called the Campaign for Military Service. When Clinton announced what he called a compromise policy, which was not a compromise at all, of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, we knew that there needed to be a long-term effort. Not only are we working in Congress to try to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and in the federal courts to try to get the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy declared unconstitutional. At our heart, we're also an organization that provides free legal services to service members who are hurt by Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And in the last 13 years, we've received 7,700 requests for assistance. These are people who are standing at the phone booth next to the aircraft carrier saying, I'm being harassed, and do I get back on that ship now, or do I go AWOL? I think that Don't Ask, Don't Tell is one of the most important issues that our community faces. And it's why I founded SLDN and why I've been working on this for 13 years. And it's because this is the one law out there where the federal government is telling us that we're not worthy, that we're second-class citizens, that we are not equal. And the military is a leader. If you can get the military to change, everything else is going to fall in place. Think back to 1948 when Harry Truman issued his executive order integrating African Americans into the military. This preceded Brown versus Board of Education. It preceded the Civil Rights Acts in the 1960s. The military can be a leader here, and for that reason I really think this is one of the most important issues in our community.
I went up to Boston, had an interview, took the test, passed the physical, and then I had to wait several months to see if I would be accepted, because I thought, well, of course, Vietnam era, they want anybody that would like to join the military. Turns out they're accepting less than 11% of the women that applied to be an officer. In the old days, there was no way to be more of an overachiever than to be a gay woman. Because first you're overachieving as a woman, most of us, because most of us felt like, if I got to do a good job, because if I don't, that's going to reflect on all the rest of the women in the military. And we want, all the guys to think that, women can do these jobs and we can do them just as well as the men. So there's one. And then on top of that, if you're gay, you really want to do a good job, because the last thing you want to do is somehow do something wrong or screw up, and next thing, oh, you're gay. I was a Navy captain, and a Navy captain is the equivalent of any other service, a colonel. They call it a bird colonel. So that was the 6th officer promotion, one step below an admiral or a general. I had probably the biggest job I had at the end. I was the deputy commander and chief of staff for the Naval Intelligence Command, which was an organization of 1,500 people, military and civilian. That morning, September 11th, I went down to the Pentagon for the scheduled weekly meeting with the Admiral from 8:30 to 9:30, where he got together with all his immediate staff and we talked about what was going on and whatever. As we were in the meeting, the New York towers were hit, and we had CNN on, and first it came on, and one of the intel officers, oh, well, they had this new way they're tracking airplanes or something, maybe there's a problem with that, an FAA problem, and then people were like, oh no, and of course, you get a bunch of intel officers together, and there was some saying, oh no, this is wrong, this must be a hijack and a whatever. So the meeting finally deteriorated after the second hit. I left the space at 9:30, and in fact was standing at the bus stop in front of the Pentagon when the plane slammed into the Pentagon. It slammed into the Pentagon at about 9:37:46 or so, and 8 minutes prior, I was in that space that was destroyed, and I lost 7 coworkers, 3 of whom I knew very well. I was in heels and a skirt and just started running out the south parking lot. Some lady next to me, I have no idea who she is, and I hope she knows that I appreciate it. She had a cell phone. I said, can I borrow your cell phone? So I got a quick cell phone call into my partner, Lynn, who worked at the Library of Congress, and she was at her desk, answered the phone. I said, I have any idea when I'll be home, but I'm okay. And she had known that I had a meeting that morning in the Pentagon. Went for several weeks, as we all did, to funerals and memorial services and whatever. And I realized that how incredibly difficult it would have been on Lynn, my partner. I mean, it would have been, if I'd been killed, hopefully I'd gone someplace nice and whatever. But poor Lynn, I said, would have been totally left alone. The military is wonderful about being supportive and helping people, particularly in time of tragedy or need. But unfortunately, Lynn didn't exist. So ultimately, she would have been the last to know if I had been killed. In fact, I wrote a note after that for Lynn, which I'm almost certain I still have in my safe deposit box. And it was a note for her to give to another Navy captain, who I don't think knew I was gay. But the note basically said, from me to this other captain, if you're getting this note from my partner, please help her. We've been together since 1990, and she's not going to have any of the support that a typical spouse would have. And I really need you to try and help her and guide her through this terribly difficult situation. As the weeks after September 11th, we started reassessing what was really important to us. And one of the things, of course, was that don't ask, don't tell. So many people on September 11th made the decision to join the military and to try and help defend our country, and we made the opposite decision, that we had personally sacrificed so much, and I realized that this wasn't fair to her or to me to continue to live under this. And on September 11th, no one knew whether, on September 15th or 20th, that more wasn't coming our way. And I think that because of that, we made a decision to retire a year earlier. Lenny was absolutely wonderful, and she works at the Library of Congress, and everybody knew she was gay, but she was very supportive of my situation and never did anything to push me into a situation that wouldn't be comfortable. I mean, there were a lot of things that she could have done, but having me there wouldn't have been good. So she was very wonderful about helping me, maintain my identity or hide my identity from anyone that shouldn't know.
Such as there's a group called the LC Globe, and it's Federal Globe, which is a group of gay people in all the different federal agencies, and then it takes on the name of the agency. So mine was the LC for Library of Congress Globe. And I didn't take on any officer role until after Joan had passed the 20-year mark, because then she could retire and she could have a pension. We couldn't go to Kate Clinton or Holly Near, even Cheryl Wheeler.
Yes.
But we did go to Provincetown a couple of times, but always watching who's walking on the street.
Yes, really.
Who's coming towards us, who's around.
Personal advice is don't join, which is not a good answer for the person that wants to join, not a good answer for the military. But at this point, it is too much of a personal sacrifice to ask somebody to be part of the military, or any organization for that matter, and have to lie about who they really are. I mean, we talk about all these core values in the military of honesty, integrity. I mean, there's nothing honest about having to pretend to be someone you're not. So my initial advice to somebody would be not to do it. However, I think that we're making great progress in getting this law changed, and hopefully in a couple of years we'll come to the realization that this law is detrimental to the military, to the country, that we need to be able to let the best and the brightest people join the military and serve, and also not have to hide their identity to serve in the military.
The current war in Iraq does cross my mind. I know that if I am accepted, and the other enlistees know that if they are accepted, that is a very real possibility. It's a very real possibility that we would be sent overseas, not only to Iraq or Afghanistan, but wars that might just be heating up right now.
They give you this form that says, I will not serve in the Republic of Vietnam, and I just thought they were asking, so I checked will not. Ended up getting into a lot of trouble. They said to me basically, why were you so stupid to sign up to go to medics training and then to become an operating room technician and think that you're not going to Vietnam? I said, well, they told me I would go to either Germany or Hawaii. And they found that very amusing. Found myself on a plane to Vietnam, and I remember getting off of the plane under a hail of bullets. It was the middle of the night, stinking hot, and we were told to duck and run for cover. So we got off the plane, ran across the airfield, and I dove into a bunker. The entire time that I was there, I knew from the moment I got up in the morning until I closed my eyes at night that I had a purpose. And the purpose was to save lives. And everybody that I worked with had the same purpose. We got to be very, very close. There was a group of about 10 of us that worked day in and day out, pulling wounded and dead men our own age who looked just like us off of the helicopters, doing what we could to patch them up, and then they were evacuated out to a hospital ship or down to Da Nang.
Within a week of arriving, yeah. It was a very short career as a combat infantryman. A lot of people died that day. I remember, I think only a small number actually ended up as prisoners of war. But they brought us back to an interrogation camp, and then eventually brought us back to Limburg, Germany, the freight yards, where they had a big collection point for American prisoners. We were to say our name, rank, serial number. I said John McNeil Private 12238-624, and that was it. In the interrogation that followed, they locked us in a room without food or drink and played, who was the singer? Bing Crosby, singing I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. It was right at Christmas time. 24 hours. And that was the worst torture I've ever had. I hate that song ever since. And then called us in and wanted to know when we got on the boat, where we landed in England, when we came into combat, who was the name of our superior officer. And I knew none of that. I was totally oblivious. They just shipped me on to a camp. The camp was outside of Berlin. And after a while, they took some of us who had no rank and brought us into Berlin to dig bodies out after the bombing raid. So I spent a good part of my time digging bodies out, bringing them to the line pits outside Berlin.
And now you were 18 then at this time?
Yeah, I turned 18 as a prisoner of war.
I served in the Navy, the submarine service. I was on a Polaris submarine from 1963 to 1966. I wasn't blatant, but I never hid who I was. So anyone who wanted to know could know that I was gay.
I didn't have to go into the military. I was a college student. College students were deferred. We didn't have to go. There were all these anti-war protests against the Vietnam War, and I was more or less in line with that, because I was taught by my mother that war is just the worst thing you can ever have, the worst last resort. But then there were those who kind of took that anti-war protest and became anti-American, which was the fashion of the time, and started burning American flags. Well, I had been raised that this country is, the freedom is the most golden thing ever. And I said, wait a minute now, that's wrong. And being very idealistic and naive and foolish, I said, well, what are you going to do about it? And I went off and joined the United States Navy.
The Office of Naval Intelligence brought me in. And basically what happened was I got an undesirable discharge for being a Class 2 homosexual. I knew they classified underwear. I didn't know they classified sissies, but they do. If you are the Nelly, use the old terms, the kids haven't heard them for years. If you're the Nelly, you're a Class 1. If you're the Butch, you're a Class 2.
I didn't know that.
Now you know.
You go through life, you work, you have insurance, but then you get to be 50 and 60 years old in the current era, and you're without insurance, and you have bupkis, and you're getting old and you're getting sick. And I went to the VA because I'm multiply disabled. And I encountered discrimination at the VA because when I see a doctor, I think they have to know I'm gay and that my lover died of AIDS. I have to be constantly checked to make sure that I'm still negative and so on. So I told this VA doctor, by the way, I'm gay, my partner died of AIDS. And this doctor jumped back 10 feet as if I'd shit on the floor. And I said, there's something wrong with this. And I had heard that there was a gay veterans organization in New York, and I went looking for it. Couldn't find it. And finally went on the internet and found a national LGBT veterans organization named EVER, and looked for the New York chapter, couldn't find it, called telephoned the closest one in Washington, D.C., ended up speaking to a retired, openly out gay, retired Marine colonel. And I asked him about the New York chapter, and he says, there isn't one, you started. Now, I had been out of the service a good 35 years, and I'd forgotten that you never volunteer, particularly to a colonel, And so the rest is, so that's what I did. I started it.
So how did you get?
Well, he walked in about a year later. Our first vice president was a World War II veteran. He since died. And now I've got one from, what was the War of 1812, dear?
The days of wooden ships and iron men, yes.
There are over 1 million living lesbian and gay veterans alive today who served from World War II on to the present. Because we've had to serve in silence, because we could never mention who we were, of these million men and women who sacrificed freedom to serve their country, who sacrificed living a free life to serve their country, how many of those people are unknown who died serving their country, and how many of their lovers never even received word, because they didn't exist, of the death and battle of their partner? How many never could come to the funeral, never receive the flag, never be thanked for their loss and sacrifice, all because of an ideological bigotry that serves no other purpose but the gratification of hate. That's what we're working to end. That's what this is about.
I was in grad school, and then 9/11 happened. I was a student at East Tennessee State, and I was actually a resident advisor in the dormitory. And I remember going down the hall, knocking on everyone's door, just feeling like this was a big moment of their life, whether they knew it or not, and they needed to be aware of it. And it really was weighing really heavy on me, and saddened me, it scared me. But it was neat to see the country kind of coming together. That was always a big thing for me, just a big patriotic fever inside of me. And I enlisted, and because of my college experience, I was immediately an E4, a specialist, which in most jobs would be very beneficiary. But because the job that I had as an enlisted soldier, an Arabic linguist, it's a two-year plus training program. I was in the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, and I spent about a year and a half there. Was really finding my niche. While I was at Fort Bragg, however, I actually kind of did two jobs. I did that for a while, and then I was temporarily assigned to a men's chorus. It's called the 82nd Airborne All-American Chorus, and we traveled around to different events, different political, social, sporting events. The way that I initially found out that something was going on, while I was singing in the chorus, we were all in the barracks, and the director pulled us all into the hallway and said, "Hey, we know that one of you is gay, or we've received an email that one of you is gay. Who is it? We need to know who it is so we can nip this in the bud and move on. We can't let this distract us." Somehow my email had been broken into, and different emails that I had written just to friends and family had been intercepted somehow, and then collected and then collectively sent to my commander. I went to the director and his assistant, and that because they had both approached this issue this way and told them, you can't do it like this. I mean, that's a total violation of the policy. And then I was asked blatantly, "Well, is it you? You're not gay, are you?" And at the time, they didn't think so, and I said no to protect myself at the time. It was a scary feeling, though. I had to watch everything I did. I felt like going out to dinner, someone was looking over my shoulder. So it was a tense period of months, about 7 or 8 months. In a way, their hands were tied. If something had happened to me, if someone decided to take matters into their own hands and I don't know, do something physically violent. If something had happened to me and then it was found out that they knew about it and hadn't acted, their butt would have been on the line. And And plus, they didn't want something to happen to me. My commander, when he did tell me that he was going to have to discharge me, there was just a weight of regret on his face, on his whole body. He didn't want to do it. He it's very unfortunate for many people, for myself, for my family, for my unit, my peers. I mean, my peers depended upon me, and here all this training I had received, now it was all for naught. So it was very hard. It was very heavy. It reminds me of the same thing that happened years ago in integrating the military racially, and within our culture, not just the military, but the same struggles that were seen as so far-fetched that those of color or women could never serve in the military, or could never make a knowledgeable decision enough to place a vote for our country. I have a specific example. While I was in Monterey, I broke my leg playing soccer for the Army, and I was away from my family. But my family in the military, they stepped up. They knew that I couldn't do things on my own. I couldn't bathe on my own. And several of my friends, they knew all about me, had no problem, and had to assist me. I mean, that's a perfect example of how it's not an issue. How something like that has no bearing on my ability to be an integral part of a team. I'm speaking for a lot of people, not just myself. I mean, my story is one of thousands. There's a lot going on in my head in trying to make sure that I make good decisions, say the right things, but not back down. I think it's important that this voice is continued to be heard, whether it's through mine or the next person to take the torch. There will always be someone until the policy is overturned.
At 11 o'clock, we have an appointment to enlist. In other cities, the enlistment, it's really hit or miss. In the first city, the enlistees became, friendly acquaintances with the enlistment officers. They chatted. I mean, it was a really nice experience. In other cities, the enlistment officers found out what we were doing beforehand and never showed up to work that day. The recruitment centers were closed down. They were fearing us even walking into the building at the possibility that they would be shown in negative light.
It was a plywood building covered with sandbags, and then there were plywood wards. Each room would have 8, 10, 12 procedures going on. In between taking one man out and bringing the next one in, we would hose the room down, literally, and take limbs out of the room and sort of bag them. I had 12 people die in my arms as I was either bringing them into the OR from the helicopter or who died in surgery, which had a profound effect on the rest of my life.
Prisoner war camp was built around a V-2 launching platform, deliberately.
And the V-2, for those who don't know, were the rockets.
The original rocket that the Germans developed, and so the British and American Air Force came and bombed. They were bombing the V-2 launching platform. They ended up bombing all the barracks in which prisoners of war were being held. So there were a large number of prisoners killed on that occasion. Those of us who weren't killed the next day were put into freight cars and shipped across Germany from the Atlantic side all the way over toward Poland. And we were maybe 7 days and nights in the boxcar without food or water So I remember licking the moisture off nail heads to get some water into my system. Again, a lot of them were wounded in the bombing and died in the freight cars. And finally we ended up in a prisoner of war camp close to the Polish border.
I got out in 8 years instead of staying in 20 because of submarines have a tendency of being a little restrictive on a lot of things, especially your life if you want to be transsexual. Over the course of nearly 10 years of living as a woman, I've met about 30 transgender submariners, you know, including a roommate I had in Phoenix and a roommate I have here in Atlanta who are also former submariners. So people can't tell me that women can't serve on submarines. They just didn't happen to look like women when they were there. We formed a committee in the organization, the National Transgender Advocacy Coalition. But after about a year in that organization as just a committee, we realized that this was too big to have just a committee. We needed to be a full-fledged organization. So in January 2003, we formed the Transgender American Veterans Association to address these issues for veterans that are transgender identified and having issues with the Veterans Administration. Shortly after that, expanded to help those who identify as being transgender who are still serving in the military. We also found out that some of them have been affected by Don't Ask, Don't Tell because the military can't understand the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. So some people have been kicked out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Others have been removed from the military under more stringent things. In fact, we even have a member who was put in Leavenworth for a few years for cross-dressing. So we are treated in some cases more drastically than gays and lesbians are when they're found out. We have done a few interesting things over the course of the years. We have made history, American history, not just GLBT history. We were the first transgender group to lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, May of 2004. It was an amazing event. There were probably 100 people witnessing this from the GLBT community and some people across the country that were there. And when the Sergeant of the Guard came out and said, "This wreath is being presented by the Transgender American Veterans Association," and we just broke down and cried. There was not a dry eye in the crowd. And even when I think about it now, I start getting teary because it made me so proud to show that we're veterans, we serve this country, and we need to be recognized. And that Sergeant of the Guard did recognize us. And that day will live forever in my mind as one of the best things that we've ever done.
I'm going to go in there, I'm going to say my name, I'm going to say I was born in the great state of Oklahoma and I'm willing to lay my life down for my country, but I'm not willing to lie to that country. I'm not willing to commit forgery, I'm not willing to lie or impersonate just to serve my country, because that is immoral. And this military is about morals. It's unfair, it's un-American to force people to lie, to lay down their morals simply to shoot a gun, to protect that country, to protect their loved ones. It's immoral.
I would look at these people, these young men who looked just like me and who could have been me, because we had fairly regular mortar attacks, sniper attacks on our compound. And there were casualties amongst the hospital personnel. We got to see the best of what it meant to be a human being, and within a blink of an eye, the worst of what it could mean to be a human being. You saw people shoot people, you saw people heal people.
One thing happened that really profoundly affected me. We were sent out to chop wood at a farm where the SS were raising minks, and they had slave laborers from Eastern Europe, and they were mixing a mash for the animals. And the Germans deliberately starved us because the Americans had control of the air. They were afraid if we were in good health, we could be armed and they would have their enemy within. So they fed us only like one small potato or a bowl of soup a day. And I was down to 80 pounds. I was skeletal. And one of the slave laborers saw how thin I was and reached into the mash and threw me a potato. Now, he risked his life. If the guard had seen him feeding me, he would have shot him. So I tried to gesture thanks to him, and his response was he made the sign of the cross. And that struck me as most extraordinary, that this man, due to his faith, had the courage to risk his life to feed me as a stranger. I date my call to priesthood to that moment. And so shortly after I left the Army, I joined the Society of Jesus and was 40 years a Jesuit priest.
Competition to become the Coast Guard version of the Surgeon General, the top physician in the Coast Guard, which is called the Director of Health and Safety. When that position came available, I applied for that, competed for that, and was fortunate enough to be selected to be the Coast Guard of Health and Safety, and that's how I finished my career. You asked me about my sexuality and how that played into my military career, and I think even today I'm still the most senior military gay person who's publicly identified themselves as homosexual. So how did I deal with that, I think is the question. That's an interesting question. Well, it was fairly easy to deal with since I didn't. I mean, it was basically, the short answer is I had no sexual life. And that's the tragedy. I mean, let me back up again. You heard me talk with great affection and enthusiasm about my time in the Coast Guard. I loved it. I loved the people. I loved the mission, and I truly did. But the tragedy was, as a gay man in the military, even before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and for 4 years under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, I could not share my life with a loved one. I could not have a family. I could not do all the things that my straight counterparts take for granted. I was deep in the closet and basically celibate. So I had no sexual life at all. And that was tragic. And it was difficult to do that, obviously, from the sacrifice you make from that part of yourself being missing. That vital part of what it means to be a human being, what it means to be a man, was absent from my life. When you're an admiral, a flag officer, you have a lot of social obligations. There are a lot of social events that are mandatory that you go to. And if I were going to be appointed as Coast Guard Admiral, I would have to do those things, and to go unaccompanied is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard to keep explaining. So I did an unusual thing, and this is a story that speaks directly to the stupidity of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy and the difficulties that GLBT people have to deal with when you have discrimination and prohibition against your very being. And there was, personal ads in the back of Washingtonian magazine. Everybody loved to read because they're very entertaining. People, basically it was mainly men seeking women and women seeking men, but there was also a gay section of there. There was men seeking men and women seeking women. So I put an ad in there that said something like, gay male executive seeks female companion for meeting social obligations. I forget the exact wording of it. I think I got 6 to 10 answers from mostly women, but one male, this was kind of interesting, one male prisoner at Lorton Prison sent me a letter saying he's going to be out of the prison soon and was I interested in getting together. Obviously I didn't answer that, but among the letters I got was this beautifully written letter from a woman who was clearly very bright, very sensitive, very intelligent. You could just tell by what she wrote in her letter. And at the time, my friend was working with the Names Project, so she was quite familiar with the gay community, obviously. Began a relationship. She then began to go to Coast Guard functions with me. From that relationship, we developed a very deep friendship. I mean, she is one of my dearest and closest friends today. I had contacted an organization called the Service Members Legal Defense Network, a wonderful organization that exists solely to help gay and lesbian bisexual service members who run afoul of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell law. At that point, I had been out to my family, been out to my friends, I have a partner. I mean, it was not like I was in the closet. I just wasn't, letting everybody know. I certainly wasn't waving a rainbow flag, and I don't have any stickers on my car, and there's no rainbow flag outside our house. So I was sort of out of the closet anyway among my acquaintances and families, and I just wasn't an activist. But I wanted to do something for the gay community. I wanted to contribute what I could for the gay community, for the cause of I guess, justice and anti-discrimination and civil rights, however we want to phrase it. And I thought that how I could do that best was use my status as a senior officer in the military to make the point to the public and to Congress and to the White House. Gay people are serving in all ranks of the military. Here we are, we're average Americans. We're just like everybody else. We're indistinguishable from our straight counterparts. Why can't we serve? Why do we have to be in the closet? Why do we have to suffer the discrimination and the massive stress that it takes to stay in the closet in order for us as patriotic Americans to serve our country?
If they choose to call the police will come out. We won't leave until they say you are under arrest. At the time when they say that, a lot of our supporters are going to leave. They won't be arrested. But those who are willing to make that sacrifice, just like those who were willing to make that sacrifice in the women's suffrage era, in the civil rights era, they will be arrested and they will go to jail.
Well, you can talk to a recruiter, but you already admitted to me that you're homosexual, and you know that the policy is that you cannot enlist in any part of the military if you admit to being a homosexual.
Right.
So I'm unsure where you want to go with this.
Well, I would like to enlist my country until I get a formal rejection saying I can't based on my honesty. I'm going to attempt to enlist.
Okay. The recruiter, Professor Irizarry, knows I'm sorry.
I'm born in the great state of Oklahoma. I'm willing to lay my life down for my country and serve my country in any way I can. And I truly believe that's the military. I want to serve in my military. Unfortunately, I'm not willing to lie to my country. I'm not willing to lower my morals simply to serve the country in the ways I think I should. That means I will not conceal my homosexuality. Will my honesty be the basis of my rejection today?
My name is Samuel Hernandez. I'm from New Brunswick, New Jersey. I'm 18 years old, and I'm here to fight for my country. And I'm not going to lie to you. I'm homosexual, and hopefully the basis of my honesty won't ruin this.
Hi, my name is Rob Carroll. I'm also from New Brunswick, New Jersey. I'm a student at USF, and I'd like to serve my country for the training and brotherhood that it gives me. I'm bisexual, and I hope that my honesty doesn't prevent me from serving.
And I'm Bill Ellis. I'm a gay trained physician willing to serve my country with honesty, as long as the basis of my rejection won't be my sexuality.
I just want to point out that we are all, although most of us are from other states, we have resided here in the great state of Florida for quite some time. So will our honesty be the basis of our rejection here today?
I was just basically, I understand you guys do want to serve your country and enlist in the Navy and the military itself, but based on the Navy's policies, on the military's policies, you guys, basically admitted to me that you guys are homosexuals, of that nature. The Navy does not accept, the military itself does not accept based on that agenda.
Right. Well, is this our formal rejection of our attempt to enlist?
As of right now, yes, it is.
Still refusing to leave. You understand that you're subject to go to jail? Sir, do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Sir, do you understand that?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, everybody understands that, okay? Everybody's now going to be arrested for trespass after warning, okay? When the officer comes to you, please stand up and turn around and put your hands behind your back.
Absolutely.
Okay? Could you please stand?
Ma'am.
Step back this way.
This is disturbing. My country is arresting me because I want the right to serve.
Excuse me.
I do not blame the people here that are following laws. I blame the laws and the people who instated those laws.
Excuse me. We're going to head that way towards the door.
Yes, ma'am.
Next, could you stand up, please, and step this way? Okay. Yeah.
When you get released, call me. If you don't have my card with you, call the Tribune and ask me to put through to Mike Wells.
The guy didn't let me say what the high and the low was.
Right.
Let me tell you what my high and low was. The low is that I live in a country where a person who wants to give their life can't do so based on their orientation. The high is that we're willing to fight for it and that we can.
Wow.
That's all in 1 week. We're human beings first. We want to give our lives first. And it doesn't matter. If you want to give your life and you're homosexual, you're not good enough to give your life. That's not a good message to send to people. That's a real low for this country.
During the year that Clinton was running for office, one of his platforms was to allow gays to serve in the military. And of course I was very supportive of that part of his platform. And the Veterans Day before the election, I came down here as I always do, and in the past have felt a real brotherhood with the other veterans that come down here on Veterans Day. And on that particular day I came down here and there were all of these Vietnam veterans holding signs like "No gays in the military," "Kill fags," "Queers don't belong in the military." And I was angered and hurt. And again, I kept thinking, looking around the crowd and thinking, whenever a gay man or lesbian was treating you with your wounds or tending to your buddies if they were dying, I am sure that our sexual orientation did not matter to you at all. And for it to suddenly matter because of a political campaign angered me. And I didn't come down to the wall again until the dedication of the Women's Memorial. And with that, I felt a renewed sense of connection to this place. Shortly after I returned to my hometown of Dayton, Ohio, I realized that I needed a chance to grow, put myself back together again, make myself whole. I realized that I really enjoyed the field of mental health. I had also taken a course at San Diego State University as I was finishing my bachelor's degree in death and dying. Moved back to Washington, D.C. and started working at George Washington University in administration with the intent of completing a master's degree in counseling. As my internship time approached for completion of my degree, I split that with an internship with an agency, nonprofit agency called the St. Francis Center, which was a grief and bereavement counseling and education center. I absolutely found my calling by working at this grief and bereavement center. It put together everything I had done in my life. In the meantime, developed a course to teach at George Washington University called Living and Dying, a Counseling Perspective, because as I went through the counseling program, there wasn't a lot of coursework that addressed grief and loss issues or people living with life-challenging illnesses.
I suspect I was young enough to be resilient. I did have the sense that I owed a debt to all those who died. So as soon as I was ordained, afterwards I returned to Germany and served as an assistant chaplain to the Army in Germany, and I made a special pilgrimage to the graveyards where my companions were buried and said Mass. I think God had a plan for me, and I gradually found out that the plan was for me to work at the spiritual liberation of gay and lesbian people. I was aware of myself as a gay man, and after I saw the courage of that man that fed me, I realized, I had to speak out and begin a ministry. So after I was ordained, I put in several years of studying the whole issue of what it means to be gay, and published a book, The Church and the Homosexual, that was 30 years ago now, and argued that gayness was God-given. It was not sin or sickness, and that people who were gay had a legitimate right to human love, and the church should reconsider its position on this matter. As a result, the church put me out of the Jesuits, ordered me to leave. I'm forbidden to have any relationship with the Jesuit order. Yeah, that's the price I had to pay to continue my ministry to gay people. See, the order from the Jesuit was give up all ministry to gay and lesbians, or give up being a Jesuit. And that came from the Pope himself. In fact, the man who ordered me dismissed from the Jesuits is the present Pope. Was Cardinal Ratzinger then.
The U-2 that I flew was a reconnaissance plane. I like to use the phrase reconnaissance versus spy plane. Some people would argue, well, it's an illusion, and where are you really in relation to space? And then they try to calculate how high you were. And then, of course, I'd have to kill you if I told you. But it's sort of one of the last remaining mystiques of the program. But you can, I'll tell you this, you get, whether it's an illusion or not, it looks like the curvature of the Earth, and it's quite humbling to see the expanse like that. And then, of course, the areas that we were flying over, many of them war zones, and you're above it all. Most of the time, you don't feel as though you're going to get shot down. There are some places we flew over that they could have shot me down, but the most, I guess the most moving aspect of it is that you feel like you're up there in this amazing serenity and peace, yet below you can only imagine, of course, what's going on, and in terms of seeing the explosions and the result of the war going on below you. When I had gotten out of the active duty military and I was looking at going into the Air National Guard and to fly, I'd gotten an opportunity to fly F-16s, and it was right at that same time that that I had really come to terms with that, well, yes, I am gay. And I really didn't feel like, in terms of my personal integrity, that I could live under Don't Ask, Don't Tell and sort of live this hidden double life. I was tempted again to get back in the military after September 11th. I live in New York City now, and of course my city was attacked as well as my airline, and I lost one of my classmates. Flight 93, Leroy Homer Jr. was the co-pilot on the flight that crashed in Pennsylvania. The opportunity came up to take some time off from my day job as an airline pilot and to be an embedded journalist with the U.S. Marine Corps in Iraq. And while I didn't see a connection between September 11th and the Iraq War, I felt like that I wanted to be with my people, so to speak. And I think that's how a lot of military, whether they're gay or straight, or regardless of their background, or agree or disagree with the war, there's this compelling sense of wanting to be there with your fellow men and women in arms as a matter of support, I guess. And so I did that. I spent time with the Marine Corps during the invasion, with the 1st Tank Battalion of the U.S. Marine Corps Combat Unit, and then I went back for the reconstruction with the Army, with the 1st Armored Division in Baghdad.
The real deal.
That's right, and I will tell you the difference between seeing Baghdad at 5.5 feet versus 70,000 plus feet is quite a difference, and every day my prayers go out for those kids that are over there, because it really is a 360-degree war zone, and they're paying the price for that. I went back to my regular life of flying airplanes, and then Katrina came in and sort of blew me off my feet, so to speak. And I felt like, that this can't be happening in my country. And I think a lot of people felt that way. And so my sort of world just kind of ground to a halt until I felt like I could actually do something. And my partner, Ellen Ratner, and I had planned to go on vacation at this same time. And so we diverted our vacation and went down, connected with 2 African American churches in Mississippi, in DeLisle and Pass Christian, Mississippi. And delivered supplies down there, and I found a new purpose, a new way to serve, and that this community, through their sense of commitment to each other, their sense of community and love for one another, was really a way to serve, and I guess a way back to this human family maybe that I had disconnected from. And out of that, I ended up writing a book called Through the Eye of the Storm. And it's a book dedicated to rebuilding what Katrina washed away. And so far, with the proceeds of the book and fundraising efforts, we've raised, Ellen and I have raised $1 million to build which is, I can't even believe I'm saying this, to build a education center and a public swimming pool. This is, to me, a beautiful example. This Pass Christian DeLisle Community Center it's a cat of a different breed, I guess you would say. I mean, here you have these 2 gay women. We've connected with these, African American United Methodist churches, and the white community and the black community. The head of the Chamber of Commerce, and our largest donor to the program is the governor of Mississippi, Republican Governor Haley Barbour. So it's America, and to me, really frankly, it's the embodiment of exactly what I experienced in the U.S. military, which is to say that it's not who's right, it's what's right. We're all in this together, and we're not of one race or gender or sexual orientation or religion, but we're Americans, and we need help, or we can give help. And I think that's the side of us that other people sometimes don't see. And I learned that in the military.
Lived on a farm. My dad had about 200 acres. I went to school at the same high school that my grandparents went to. Just very small, quiet community. I just sat down one day when I was in high school thinking, well, what am I going to do after high school? And I got thinking, well, my father was in the military, my brother was in the military. I really like America. And in one of those young patriotic moods of having to pay back to the country that spawned me, I went down and talked to the recruiter. Eventually went in and signed up with my parents and spent the rest of the time in high school and left right after high school for the military. I was a gunner on the 50 caliber machine gun on top of the Humvee. And it was about 11:30, all dark and everything else. The gun was pointed straight back. I was still looking this way. And right about then, never saw him or anything. He must have just jumped up, fired, and jumped back down. And he shot, RPG-7, rocket-propelled grenade. My training kicked in. I ducked down real fast. My night vision goggles slung them off, and right then my vision started coming back. And yeah, I had to wipe the blood out of my eyes so I could see completely. I sat down in the seat inside the Humvee. And right then I went like this, sat down and just put my hands down in my lap. And I pulled my hands up like, oh, I feel something warm and sticky. Oh shit, I pissed myself. And I was all mad until I looked down, and right then we went past a street light and I could see it was blood. I'm like, oh, thank God I didn't piss myself, it's only blood. Well, and then I freaked out because my entire crotch is covered in blood. After I got to the hospital, of course, they put me under, did the surgery. I woke up the next day, and that afternoon, they ended up putting me on a flight back to Germany because just with all the shrapnel bits in me, they were scared that staying in country with all the sand, dirt. When I got back to Germany and started thinking about it, it really wasn't scared. It was more of just putting a lot of things in perspective. You know, I know a lot of gay guys in the Army. And frankly, none of them were bad soldiers. They're probably some of the best soldiers I've ever seen because they're trying to prove something. And it just really started clicking home more and more and more that it's complete, total betrayal. Especially to the soldiers. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm the best sergeant ever, because I know there's better, but still, I mean, my soldiers were my babies, and I'm going to watch over them, and they will make it out alive. I will guarantee that. When I became a sergeant, I had to recite the NCO Creed, which in there says accomplishment of my mission and welfare of my soldiers is paramount to everything, and that I will uphold the Army values of honesty, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, integrity, and personal courage. And I was breaking a ton of those by being closeted. So not only am I jeopardizing my integrity and my honor, but I'm wounded to boot, and all of it can be taken away just because I'm gay. I have a friend of mine that was in the same battalion as me, and I knew he's gay. He knew I was gay. It was just one of those things, hey, cool, gay people. And he was actually friends with a person that runs an institute that studies sexual minorities in the military, named Aaron Belkin. And Aaron Belkin was actually looking for a gay wounded soldier to talk to basically put in the news going, hey, this guy was wounded, he's gay, let him serve. And so I emailed him, he emailed me back, he explained it all and told me that it was totally anonymous. I did not have to give my name since I'm still in. And about 2 days after I talked to him, I started talking to one of my soldiers and told him about it because he knew I was gay. And the more we talked, the more I realized that's just blatant way to put it, chicken shit way out. If I'm going to come out, by God, I'm going to come out. Being an anonymous person doesn't mean nothing. I'm sitting here talking about how it's compromising my integrity and personal courage and everything else. Well, I don't have enough personal courage to actually use my name. So I called up Aaron and said basically, you know what? Let's do it all the way. The Advocate article hit, and then shit hit the fan. Apparently even the Pentagon called me down to ask what the hell was going on. I had 2, 3-star generals calling about me. That pissed a lot of people off, and naturally got pulled back in the colonel's office and ended up getting legal representation through the military Did one more interview with Jim Lehrer NewsHour. Did the interview with the Associated Press. And just the fun of it all. About a week after that, I get called again, basically come to the colonel's office. We can't discharge you. Because apparently, this is how good I am at not even knowing it. Every interview I did, I never once was quoted as saying I'm gay. So technically, I've never admitted to being gay. So they can't technically discharge me under the don't ask, don't tell policy. But my colonel was explaining that they have again, small town education, significant evidence that they can launch an investigation in me to find out if I am gay or not, then they can discharge me. And my colonel basically flat out said, hey, you know what, you're a good guy, you're a damn good soldier, I'm not going to screw you like this. And he took all the paperwork and he stuffed it in his desk, and it's probably still there. And he held on to the paperwork until I discharged normally. So he helped me out a lot with that. As for anything to bring away with this, on the one floor of my barracks, when I left Germany, there was 4 gay guys. And everyone was a damn good soldier. And to be honest, I wouldn't doubt of those 4, 2 of them kept soldiers alive. Jobs like linguists, medics, stuff like that without them, the military would not be here. You need support staff, but that's all we've had come out. We need some of the people the infantry, the artillery, the real tough jobs that people still turn around and go, see, gay people can't serve, they're not in those jobs, those are the big butch jobs. Gay people don't like that. Which is BS, because I've met more gay infantrymen than I have docs in the military. And the more they come out, the more people realize there's gay people everywhere. All walks of life, all personalities, every job in the military. The better it's going to be.
Our government is discriminating against a group of people who are willing to stand up and fight for that government, to put their lives on the line, and people don't realize that they're saying, no, your life isn't good enough. Your duty is not strong enough. It seems, in my mind, there need to be more events like this, weekly events like this, to make sure people don't put this in the back of their head and not think about all the discrimination that's going on. I think it's the Army's loss that they rejected me. Whenever I get involved with something, I do it 110%. As you know, everything I possibly can, I try and do it. And they can see that in any of the organizations I've been a part of. They can see that in any of my education that I've done. That I do everything that I can to be a great person doing whatever it is. So I think it's their loss. I would have been a great soldier, and they didn't want it.
Now, I see many cases of extreme courage coming from a faith basis in the present military, in Iraq and previously in Vietnam. And I think the Army's making a huge mistake to exclude, well, they're not excluding, but not allow gay people to be themselves and to be public about their gayness at the time that they're serving in the military. It's a kind of hypocrisy, and it backfires on the Army, because if sooner or later you're going to reveal your gayness, and then the Army is obliged to dismiss you, and they're losing literally thousands of excellent soldiers.
The last young man that I worked on or worked with was a beautiful, beautiful blonde man from the Midwest who looked, it could have been me, it could have been any of my friends. We were the same age, and he was lying on the table, conscious, and just kept looking at me and pleadingly begging me to not let him die. And I knew he would. I had found a note in his pocket from his wife saying, "Can't wait to see you next week for our R&R in Hawaii." And I remember thinking to myself how wrong it was that I was the last face that he saw before he died, when in fact there were people thousands of miles away who loved him, who didn't even know that he was dead. The thought occurred to me how sacred of a role that I played in this man's life, because at least he didn't have to die alone. And I knew that his family would have been grateful to me for having been there with him. And that secret that I learned about life is what now helps me continue to do the work that I do in end-of-life care. And it's the lesson that once you begin to work with people at the end of life or people who are grieving, you begin to realize that it is sacred work. And I would not have learned that had I not had my experience in the military.
Friends of mine had taken me out for my birthday, and on my way home, there's a little neighborhood bar close by, and I was like, oh, let me just swing in here real quick and see one of my friends who was a bartender, and in doing so, I ran into Todd, and the day we met, my birthday, was the actual date he came out. I mean, he finally said, you know, enough is enough. He told his wife, he told his family that he was gay. So it was kind of a big day for him. I mean, he came out, met someone. I had no intentions, I'm sure, of meeting anyone at that point, and let alone having like an 8-year relationship involved. So it was good. Absolutely loved the military. Loved the military. I mean, the military was his life. He knew he was gay, but just the whole policy of don't ask, don't tell, the whole mindset of the military. He got married, had a son. Yeah. Not once, but twice. When we first met, I had no idea the man was sick. He got around as any healthy, red-blooded American person would. I mean, it wasn't until probably 4 months into our relationship that he came to me and told me he had B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a cancer that attacks your lymph nodes. I asked him why he had been so secretive about it, and he's like, he just didn't want to scare me away. His first wife, during a doctor's appointment, they wanted to set up some radiation appointments, and she had made the comment that you can't have it on the first Tuesday of the month because she had to get her nails done. And so I guess, you know, just that fear of how I was going to react, or, you know, oh my gosh, he's sick, I'm not going to be involved, kind of put him off. But it was about 4 months after we met that he told me he had the B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Well, about the flag, Todd came to me one day, just out of the blue, and said, you know what, we have a gay pride flag, we have a leather flag, we have a bear flag, there's all these flags for different groups and organizations and stuff. And he's like, we don't have anything to show our men and women overseas that are gay and lesbian supportive, that we support them. And so he said, you know, being an Army guy myself, this is something that I think I would like to do. Literally, like, woke up one morning and asked me about it, and like within a week it just snowballed into literally like having material and coming to my mom and asking her to sew this flag for him.
Todd and Ron were partners, and Todd was always into something, doing something, and he asked me, he said, so you sew? And I said, well, yeah, some. He said, if I had designed a flag, he said, could you sew it? And I said, well, I'll give it a try. So he designed the flag and told me what he wanted out of it, how he wanted it done, and I put it together for him. So pretty much I was just the maker of the flag.
The flag represent and look as much like the American flag as possible without pissing people off, if I am allowed to say that. The eagle, the peak triangle, which again represents our history, the accent here, which represents represents the lesbian community. Then the different versions here, the different stripes here, represent the branches of the military. And then if you're not into the whole military, we obviously have like then the basic version down below here. The black stripe is for, that means the country's at war, and we have men and women overseas literally fighting to put their life on the line. And Todd's goal was, if the ban on Don't Ask, Don't Tell is lifted, that this black stripe be taken off of the flag itself. So hopefully in the near future, this black stripe here will no longer be part of the flag, and will no longer have to be part of the flag ever again.
Because I sewed, I guess it would have been whoever could have sewn, you know, that was willing to help me.
Well, having the mother-in-law.
Yeah. And I think too, because he asked me one time, he said, are you afraid of doing this? And I said, well, no, why would I be? And he said, well, you don't know who might come after you. You know, he said, there's a lot of people that think this is wrong. Well, that's their idea, you know. And like I said, we don't always have to agree, but if we love them, we stand beside them, we support them no matter what. So that's where I'm at. I mean, he was just, like I said, he was like one of my kids. I loved him like I love one of my kids. So I supported him in what he wanted to do.
As far as the flag goes, as far as getting it recognized and trying to get people to acknowledge it, Todd had taken pictures and made pamphlets and sent to different organizations all the way up to the president. I mean, he literally sent the president a copy of the book and pictures of the flag. And so it was definitely determined to get his message out and get the flag acknowledged and go forward with this. Like I said, just to help the gay community as well as the veteran service organizations out there. So. It was definitely a slow progression. As I said, even up until the end, the day that he passed, I didn't expect it. I mean, you know, it wasn't like he he wasn't bedridden. He wasn't like he was down and out. It wasn't like he was. He would do dishes. He would run my bubble baths. He would have my dinner ready when I would come home from work. So it was a total shock when I came home that day. The day that he passed, I went to work, gave him a kiss, told him I loved him. I said, I'll see you when you get home. He had told me he had a migraine. He said, so if I'm lying down when you get home, go ahead and make you something for dinner. So when I got home that night, I went in to give him a kiss and let him know I was home, and that's when I found him. My one regret is not knowing that that was going to be his last day. I didn't get to tell him goodbye. I mean, that's my one regret. As I stated before, he was just healthy. I mean, it wasn't like I was preparing myself. There was the one thing that Todd instilled and kept telling me over and over, no matter how bad the situation is, no matter what happens, always tell that person what you think and how much you love them and how much you care. Even if you're upset to the point that you have to walk away, say you love me first or I love you, and then turn and go your separate ways. So yeah, telling him I loved him was definitely something I hold dear to me. Like, to see Todd's dream come true, as far as this flag being recognized, not so much monetary aspect of it, just to let people know that there are men and women who put their lives on the line each and every day for our country, and this flag just kind of is a small part of acknowledgement for them, to let them know, that we are thinking about you and we are proud of you, and we're glad that, you're out there doing some of the stuff that some of us are afraid to do. So this is a little shrine that I have set up, if you will, of Todd. Here he is in his Army fatigues, getting ready to march in his last Gay Pride Parade, actually. He always wore his fatigues proudly, with the medallions, like I said, different branches of the military. A little button that I had made that I wore at Gay Pride this past year. His dog tags. Just my way of keeping him around a little bit longer. Like I said, I would come home from work. My bath would be ran. I'd have a bubble bath. My dinner would be waiting. My bed would be turned down for me to go to bed. So just, yeah. Always going to the store, and for some strange reason, he would buy me fudge bars, and I still to this day don't know what that was all about. I don't know.
Did you like fudge?
I learned to like them. So I'm very, very blessed to have known and love someone like Todd. Back in 2004, October 1st, my aunt had passed away, and the day after the funeral and stuff, I'm laying in bed and not feeling too well and stuff, and Todd was forever bringing me breakfast in bed and stuff. So the day that he brought me breakfast in bed, he wrote, "I love you, and remember, I'm always here for you." And so for some strange reason, I just never erased it, and now that he's not here, it's just a small reminder. And while you always know, and I always know that, and I knew that he loves me, and this just helps remind me of better days and happier times, and